but I wanted to show this to at least to the people watching on video, because I had this conversation with Andrew Zarian, and we talked about how live audio wrestling was kind of ahead of its time when it came to on-demand shows.
Oh yeah.
Like, if I don't know, I mean, if you can go back to that time frame, like, do you see that as like, wow, we were really ahead of the game and kind of where the whole thing was kind of going, a few years later? Like, I feel like you guys did such a great job of creating the momentum of where we got to, in the 2000s and the 2010s and such.
For live audio wrestling, just for people that are not familiar with the show, it launched in 1997 with a team that included Donnie Abreu, Jeff Merrick, Chris Tidwell, and then later Dan Lebransky and Jason Agnew coming on. And I didn't join the show until 2003. And I had discovered the show because it was on the local sports station here in Toronto. And like as early as I can remember, they had the ability to download the show. So in 1999, like this is pretty novel when it comes to pro wrestling media that you could download and listen to on your Real Player or like Winamp or something.
Yeah.
Like way before iTunes and such. So I thought they were like extremely ahead of the game. And then they also got involved with running several wrestlers' websites, including Lance Storm and Chris Benoit and Dynamite Kid and Perry Saturn. And what they were like websites where there would be writing on it and results of whatever's going on in their careers. And then Jeff Merrick would also do a weekly audio update with said wrestler, which to me would be probably your first quote unquote wrestler podcast before such a thing existed. And Lance has like kept up his site all these years later. It started there. And with the audio, like it went from Jeff Merrick to then working with Brian Alvarez as well. So it's like his entire like 20 plus years has been like documented.
I need to ask him about this. Maybe I'll have him on this show and ask him about it. That's a fascinating story.
Yeah. So it was like, yeah, a ton of foresight just in terms of, and I don't even know what the impetus was at the beginning. They worked with a company called Thin Data. So this was very much in their wheelhouse, like in the early days of like, the internet boom of the late 90s before kind of the crash. But it was just, how do we get this show to as many people as possible that are not in Toronto and are not staying up? This show would come on at 1 a.m. Eastern time. So like, you think of like the audience, and there was quite an audience that would stay up till 3 a.m. listening to this show and make for a really tired Monday morning. But for most people, most sane people, it would be going to the website and you could listen to it the next day.
No, like that whole story, that whole idea, you have to have some really creative minds and, to be kind of pioneers of that. I also give a lot of credit to Brian Alvarez. He doesn't like to take the credit, but I was like, man, to really, really make your website mostly about audio back then was a pivot, and it kind of laid the groundwork for, and he wasn't the first to do it. People remember Pro Wrestling Insiders had audio really heavy, and like you guys, but he like kind of turned it into this subscription thing, and then he created the community out of it, which was really, really smart. So yeah, I love the taking it back so people kind of understand to where we got to now, because there was a groundwork that was laid, and it was different places to where we are now. And I think there's a nice there's a nice combination of written stuff, like you said, your first instinct is still to write a story, and the audio. And then you look at someone like Sean, who's created this Patreon to really drive his website as far as the breaking news stuff. So lots of fantastic ideas, and I love to see those pieces of what the wrestling media is, and kind of what's going to be next. Who's going to have the next great idea that other people are going to go, oh, we can do that as well. So that piece is fascinating.